That's true. Naked Palpatine.
Oh, you pick that one. Fresh out of the clone tank, nude Palpatine is my
Well, that's the first thing I think of when you say Dark Empire Palpatine.
Hello everybody, I need a weapon, and welcome back. Technically not, because it's just the mainline games, but the Halo expanding universe, like it's not really, the intro doesn't really work for this one. We're just talking about the game here, Halo 4, first game by 343 Industries. I could talk about gameplay and all that, but if you've been on this channel long enough, you know that I don't give a damn, and I'm not one of the people to do it. There are much better people with much better editing skills, with much better knowledge of video games to give you such a perspective. I just play games for fun. I'm not a gamer in the sense of being good. So, is the gameplay perhaps weaker than the Bungie era? Yes. But we're here to talk about the story, which I think is actually pretty superb and better than 3. So, Halo 4 is 5 years after the events of Halo 3, and Master Chief is getting woken up by Cortana because there's somebody scanning the ship. And then, as Master Chief's waking up, we start to notice some things are off for Cortana as well. Because as the expanding universe has shown, that an AI lives for 7 years and starts to deteriorate. But she was made a year before the events of the Halo games. So this is, or a couple years before the events of the Halo games. So she's a year past due at this point now. After those 5 years, and then the events of the games, it's been past 7. So it's time for her to go. But they're trying to make it out. And they find the Covenant. What? But they defeated the Covenant. The Covenant made a peace act. What's going on here? Well, now the problem with the game is it is rather vague. And to be fair, it's not like Master Chief would know the difference. There's actually, it actually doesn't make a lot of sense in the grand scheme of things. There's some hiccups here and there because on the one hand, I could say, well, how would they know that there, was a beast act, like he was stranded in space? I suppose maybe Cortana learned it. I don't know how. She's in a derelict spaceship, but I suppose it's possible. But regardless, later on, I think it's Master Chief who's like, that's weird, I thought, or maybe it was Cortana. The point being, the game's rather vague as to what's up with that, but no. So if you haven't been watching any of my expanding universe reviews and you've just been, and you're just coming here watching my game review for some reason, after the events of Halo 3, the humans have a uneasy sort of, but right now, current peace with the Sangheili, with the elites, currently, because Arbiter's in charge of all of them. On the other hand, we have the Kigyar, the Jackals, and they very much are just pirates, and they like to trade. So they're getting along pretty well with humanity. They're not like best buds or anything, but they, the Kigyar can sell to them, they can sell back, like mutual benefit, like they're cool. However, there's a bunch of splinter factions that have come to exist since the events of Halo 3, because not everybody agrees that there should be peace among humans. So down the line, we'll get to Halo Wars 2, but there has been mention of it in the expanded media that I've read in chronological order. So if you're doing chronological order like me, then you know that a couple things exist right now. We have the Banished, which is a faction that is primarily brutes with some elites and a lot of jackals and grunts. We also have Keepers of the One Freedom, but the difference between the Banished is that the Banished are very atheistic. They have completely dropped any sort of religious aspect to themselves. They are just utterly devoid of faith. They are atheists now. But they still hate humans because they fought them for 30 years and they lost a lot of good people, so they don't want peace. So that's their thing. Keepers of One Freedom are still religious. They still believe in their gods. They just believe that the covenant, that the high prophets lied to them. And the Keepers of One Freedom, the difference is too, they don't necessarily hate humans. They'll allow humans into their ranks so long as they adhere to the faith. So that's a different development. And then what we learned in the Kilo 5 trilogy by Karen Travis, which is mainly the one you want to read if you want to understand the state of affairs set after the events of Halo 3, we learned about Jewel Mandama, who is a Sangheili who does not agree with the Arbiter, and he doesn't agree that there should be peace with humans. So he's his own splinter faction, and it's mostly elites with like grunts and some jackals, but none whatsoever, no brutes. There are no brutes in Jewel Mandama's faction. So this whole spiel is to say that any covenant that Master Chief fights in Halo 4 is a part of Jewel Mandama's splinter faction group. So that's that. Anyway, they find out that they're next to a Forerunner shield world. We learned about these in a couple different places. If you're the Forerunner trilogy by Greg Bear, you would have read it there. If you've read Ghost of Onyx, you would have seen one. If you read Glasslands, you would have seen one. The shield worlds, which are very much a didact inspiration, which we'll get to in a second as well. But so they end up getting put on this place, and basically Master Chief just wants to get back to Earth. He needs to find Halsey so he can heal or try to fix Cortana, because this has been his main constant friend for like almost a year. I mean, in his head it's been a year. It's been longer than that, but for him it's been like about a year. They just consistently had her in his head. So, you know, it's like the closest companion he's ever had. And he doesn't want to lose her. And that's like the big B plot of the story. And so he wants to get back to Earth to heal her. That's like his main gist. So they're trying to hail this big ship that you would have seen if you've been reading the Expanded Universe with the UNSC Infinity, one of their largest ships. So they're trying to use the station to contact them. But in so doing, they end up accidentally, well, kind of on purpose, because the Didact kind of led them there to release the Didact, this long-lost Forerunner. As far as we know, the only Forerunner still alive at this point. And he says a big, giant spiel about how humanity did not obtain the mantle. It's very vague, it's very ambiguous, and not very clear. And this is a thing of, like, where I understand people's complaints that you have to read extended media in order to understand his character, but I feel like they give me enough to where I get it. Is it a super strong character? Not necessarily. I think the voice acting certainly helps with the performance and everything, but he is a Forerunner who didn't agree with all of his other Forerunner companions. He didn't believe that, you know, humanity needed to be saved. He believed that the best way to combat the Flood was just to turn humans into these composer Prometheans that are just basically robots with human souls, if you want to call it that, and to fight off the Covenant, because the Covenant they can corrupt AIs, but they can't corrupt just literally robots that are programmed. So it's like that is like their biggest thing. It's either you wipe everybody out or you use those things against them. That's pretty effective. But of course, not everyone agreed with that. But so that's his big thing. He doesn't think whatever, and it's very vague in the actual story. He says stuff about the mantle of responsibility. Humans have not achieved it. They don't deserve it. Whatever that means. The universe is, I mean, from the game itself, I think you could kind of determine that whatever that means is something to do with the universe as a whole and humanity's place in it, and that humanity, have they risen to a spot where they should be in charge, is basically the gist of that, without getting to extended media. And Didact's like, no, they should all die. And that's like his whole thing. That's his whole thing. That's all you get, but that's all you really need, you know? But then Master Chief meets back up with some other people, goes and defeats the Didact, and that's basically the whole game. That's all it is. That's the main plot. The B plot is everything with Cortana as she continues to deteriorate and the relationship between Master Chief and her, which is the most powerful part of the story. The didact doesn't matter as much as maybe it should. And it might have even been a start to a trilogy where he came back, but the thing is that people hated it, or a lot of people hated it, so he went a whole different direction with 5. People hated that even more, so then they moved away and moved to Infinite, which was a little bit of a middle ground, but still not as hype as it should have been. But that's non-spoiler wise. Of course, I can mention, if you are an Expanded Universe fan, then this works perfectly. I mean, the Forerunner trilogy by Greg Bear really establishes the Didact as this really interesting character, and really shows like how he got here. Because he's always harbored this hatred, but really with how driven he is and his purpose behind it really comes in the final book, Silentium, when he interacts with the Primordial, one of the last precursors, but it is a grave mind. And they have a whole conversation together, and that's really starts corrupting his mind. He thinks he's above it, but he starts to be corrupted, and so that's also why it looks kind of weird, because he doesn't look like that in the terminals you can find in this game. So all in all, I understand people's frustrations, but this story, more so than Halo 5, you really don't need any other knowledge to enjoy. You really just need the game, but some additional context does make it better, absolutely. But, I would recommend the Forerunner trilogy by Greg Bear, even if you weren't a Halo fan. So if you want to know more about the Didact, read that trilogy. It's really good. It's probably the only thing really, truly worth reading, at least that I've read so far, in the Halo EU. So I hope you checked it out someday. But overall, I enjoyed it. The Expanded Universe has been a thing I've been going through in this, Halo universe. And it's all written better than probably Halo 4 is, at least on the main plot-wise. But again, it's a book, it has more time. But I think this game gets a lot of hate, but the story is probably just a lot better than Halo 3, because Halo 3 doesn't really have a plot, and when it does have a plot, it directly, seemingly tries to contradict what came before, with no real explanation. Truth just doesn't act like truth. Miranda Keyes says stupid things like to war, stuff like that. The plot is weak in Halo 3, but you stay there because of what the first 2 games established, and because the emotional beats still hit. But I think the main plot of Halo 4 is actually pretty decent, and I think the B plot with Cortana and Master Chief is masterful. So those are my thoughts on that. I'm going to get into some spoilers. If you somehow haven't played this game as of this time, then you should bail. It starts with Halsey interrogated, which was a really good scene, and matches up, because right now she would be stuck at Oni as of the end of the events of the Kilo 5 trilogy. When we start to see the Cortana rampancy, we kind of get the most emotion we've ever gotten from Chief ever. And it's brilliant how 343 does it. Because it's not like he becomes this wisecracking guy who talks all the time, or even a guy that talks a ton. I mean, there's a lot of time just between him and Cortana, and he talks a bit to her. But whenever he's around other people, he doesn't talk as much. It's really only with Cortana, but it works really well. And the way they do, the movements of his head, his body language says so much, despite the fact that we can't see his face. And I think that's just beautiful. And then we get, we have the Jewel Mandama faction that I mentioned before, and then we have the Prometheans as the other villains of this game. And they're pretty cool design-wise. I think they're pretty cool. I think the biggest drawback is just that the whole game feels like Call of Duty, which just really bogs it down. Also, we have Lasky, who he may not be Sergeant Johnson, but I really like Lasky, and he's a really cool character. And, if you watched the movie Forward Unto Dawn, you would have seen a bit of his backstory. But regardless of that or not, I just think that Lasky's a real one, a bro, and he's a lot of fun. Also, we get to see Sarah Palmer, Spartan 4. She's probably introduced here, but if you've been reading the EU, in chronological order, we've seen her a few times now, so it was cool to see her in the game. We also have, a librarian AI, and this was a bit of a thing. Partway through the game, people get really mad at this plot point too. They seem to think that the librarian's saying that because she was trying to organized things in such a way that she planned, like, literally everything, like, all the events of all the Halo games all happened exactly according to plan, which is not what I think the librarian's saying. What I think she's saying is that, she preserved humanity, she saved humanity, she helped catalog them and tried to experiment, do some things, so that way, eventually, at some point, they would be able to withstand, the flood, and if the Didact came back, everything. So I don't think she's meaning to say that she literally planned every single detail up to this point exactly. Like, I don't think that's what she's saying. I think people over-exaggerate that. Also, thanks, Travis, for Del Rio, because Del Rio is the stupidest and most ineffective captain I've ever seen in maybe not all franchises, but in many. And it is thanks to Karen Travis that we had a couple lines of dialogue in those books where it says, like, Parangoski says that Del Rio, this was a joint effort between UNSC and ONI, and so she could have gotten somebody that she trusted more and thought is more competent, but Del Rio was reasonably confident, decently so, not somebody she would have picked, but that was the compromise she had to make with the government. So it kind of helps explain why they would allow such a loser to be in charge. Del Rio also has this huge rant. Like, you, give me that AI, and what do you know? You're an old Spartan, you're an old man, blah, 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 blah. And Chief just ignores him. It is wonderful. There's a station next to Halo 3, a ring that has the composer, which will turn everybody into the Prometheans. There's this really poignant little scene that has always stuck with me even when I finished it in 2014, originally. But Master Chief is talking to the scientist lady, about moving the composer, and she's like, "It's huge. Like, unless you're a lot stronger than you look, we're not moving that thing." And then she realizes that he's not planning on moving; he's planning on destroying it. And there's just this little, she looks like heartbroken. I mean, assuming they started work on this shortly after the events of Halo 3, like, she's put, like, her blood, sweat, and tears into all this, And I don't get too much information about her, but it's just, like, in her facial expressions and the acting, something about it, it's just, and she's doing everything she's told. She's not making a huge fuss about it. But before they leave, she just goes back to Master Chief and she says, "Next time you rescue us, can you give us time to pack?" And Master Chief just goes, "Next time." Something about it. I don't know. It was a really, really good scene. And then everybody dies. And we get these amazing emotional moments where Cortana, Jen Taylor... Is it Jen Taylor? I forget her name. Not Jen Taylor. Jen Taylor is female Master Chief. Frick. I had her name just the other day. The voice of Cortana. I'll remember it eventually. I'll put it in the description maybe. But she just gives this phenomenal performance. She's like, they'll pair you with another AI. They may even make it a Cortana model. But it won't be me, right? I'll be gone. And, Chief is just like, "No, like, you can't. Like, I'm going to fix this." He's like, look desperate. And then they face the Didact. Cortana saves Master Chief. Master Chief finishes the job. And again, we'll get into this in a forward story stuff. There's a comic book where the Didact returns. Now, whether that's a good comic book or not is not the point of discussion. But people go like, "How could they kill him off in a comic?" It's like, but bro, like, the game heavily implies that he died here. Like, I believed he died in 2014, and then again when I played it a couple years ago, and then again when I rewatched it for this review. Like, there's no reasonable thing to imagine that he survived that at all. Right? Like, if you were to go to 4 to 5, that makes perfect sense. Like, there's no reason to think that the Didact survived. Okay? The fact that he survives in the comics, so what? I thought he was dead. So, if you're going to bring him back, why not in the EU? If he doesn't matter for the story moving forward. I mean, they might have meant for him to matter later, but clearly they changed direction. I don't mind that, necessarily. I think that's just, gamers being upset because not everything's a video game. But not every story can be told in a video game format. Not necessary sometimes. But yeah, so they defeat him. Cortana saves him one last time, but now she's dead, truly and utterly. And this whole game really reinforces the whole like, are you human or are you a machine? You know, and Lasky and Chief have a conversation at the end of it that was really compelling. He's like, you know, it's our duty as soldiers to protect humanity. And Lasky's like, you say that like being a soldier and a human are two separate, or being a soldier and a person are two separate things, but you're still human. And that's kind of how the book ends, or how the story ends. And then there's a speech by the didact at the end as Master Chief's getting his armor off. But I don't know. Overall, I thought the game was pretty solid. I really enjoyed it. Up next, I have 2 video games. I think they're originally mobile games, but now you can play them on Steam if you want to. Halo Spartan Strike and Spartan Assault, along with issues 8, 9, and 10 of Halo Escalation. So until then, guys, let's finish the fight.